Hi, 7th graders. Today we're going to be talking about multiplying and dividing rational numbers. Specifically, for your essential question, you're going to write, I can multiply and divide positive, I'm going to abbreviate, and negative fractions. Sorry, that looks a little crazy. Okay, so now we're going to jump down to the review. I want you guys to pause the video, but right before you do, just remember your rules that a negative times a positive equals a negative. Negative divided by a negative will get you a positive, and a positive divided by a negative will also get you a negative. It's similar to multiplication. So pause the video, and then we will go over the review questions in class. Now we're going to get to the focus of today. So I see this fraction, and it looks kind of scary, but when I break it down, it seems to be a little bit easier. So I notice right away that there's a 6 and there's a 3. The 6 and the 3. And I also know that these can be cross-reduced. So that means that I can reduce them because they are right across from each other. I'm going to reduce the 6 down to a 2, and I'm going to reduce the 3 down to a 1. And I reduced these by just dividing them both by 3. So now my new fractions are going to be 2 sevenths times negative 2 over 1. There, that looks a little bit less scary. So now, like we did in the review up above, when you have negative 12 times 9, you're just multiplying from left to right. So that's what you do when you have a fraction. You start at the numerator and you just multiply left to right. So I'm going to start at the 2. So 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. Remember that, like we said up above, a negative times a positive will get us a negative. So then I'm just going to go down to the denominator and multiply across. So 7 times 1 will get me 7. So my answer is negative 7/4. And remember, you can write this in another way where you can write the negative out front, in front of the whole fraction. Oops, that doesn't look very out front. So you can write it like this too. Either way, they mean the same thing. Oftentimes, you'll probably see me doing this way, but make sure you understand that if the negative is out in front, it means this whole fraction is negative. Something I want you guys to make a little note of is when we multiply, you just multiply straight across. So I'm going to write that here. Multiply equals straight across. So once you see that you have both of the fractions in multiplication form, then you just simply multiply across. Make sure you are multiplying the numerator straight across and the denominator straight across. It doesn't matter which one you do first. Just make sure you're not multiplying like 2 divided by 7 and negative 2 divided by 1. So now we're going to jump down to this problem right here. Negative 8 divided by negative 1/2. So right away, I know that when I am dividing fractions and 1 is not a fraction, I need to turn it into a fraction. So I need to turn the negative 8 into an improper fraction. So I'm going to turn it into negative 8 over 1. And then I'm just going to rewrite the negative 1/2. Okay, so now dividing is a little bit different than multiplying because we need to keep, change, flip. So we need to keep our first fraction, change the sign to multiplication, and then flip it. We need to flip the second fraction to its multiplicative inverse. Such a fun word to say, multiplicative inverse. So that means that we are just flipping the fraction around. So it should look like this, -8/1, because we're keeping. We're changing the division to multiplication, and then we're flipping the -half to -2/1. This way, when we change the sign, we're also changing the fraction. So then we're just going to multiply straight across like we did before. So we have -8 times -2, which is a positive 16, because negative times negative is positive. And then 1 times 1 is 1. So this simplified is 16. So I'm just going to write a little bit of a step for that one, like I did with the multiplying. So I'm going to write divide. So first, we make sure we have improper fractions. Then we keep, change, flip, and then we multiply across. Oops. And then this is a very important step. And then we reduce. That's how you divide fractions. Now we're going to move on to something a little more complex, but I believe in you guys. So first we have our mixed number that we need to change to an improper fraction, and we have to do this twice because we have two mixed numbers. So remember our rule for changing improper fractions to mixed numbers. 5 times -5 is -25, and then we just add the 1. So -25 plus 1 is -24, and it still goes back over that 5. I'm just going to rewrite the division sign. And then 3 times 2 is 6. 6 plus 1 is 7. So 7/3. And now we need to keep, change, flip. So I'm just going to write that over here. So we are keeping the -24/5. And then we're changing the division sign to multiplication. And then we are flipping the 7/3 to 3/7. And now we just get to multiply across. So -24 times 3. I don't know that off the top of my head, so I'm going to come up here and do 24 times 3. 4 times 3 is 12. Carry the 1. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 plus 1 is 7. I have 72. But since it's -24, I need to make sure, because I'm multiplying a negative times a positive, I'm making sure I'm keeping the negative. So we have -72. And then 5 times 3 we know is 35. So our fraction is going to be -72/35. And remember, I can write it that way, or I can write it this way, 72/35, and then put the negative out in front. Because remember, even though the negative up here is in the -72, this 35 is also negative. So the whole fraction is negative. All right, so now we are going to come down here. And we are going to try to figure out what this whole thing is. I know it looks really intimidating, but it's a lot less scary when you break it down. So let's start with this -7. We know that if we have a whole number, we need to turn it into an improper fraction. So I'm just going to write down here, I'm just going to rewrite the problem. -1/7 times 4/5. And then times -7/1. Because remember, 7/1 is the same thing as just saying 7. So in this case, it's -7. And I'm going to add my parentheses, and then I'm going to add my brackets. So one way I could figure out this problem, because all of the signs are multiplication and none of them are division, I could just multiply straight across. But because multiplication is commutative and associative, I can do something kind of different. I can rearrange the numbers how I want to. So I see that I have a -1/7 and a -7/1. These are the multiplicative inverses of each other. So if you put them together, they will equal 1. I'll show you what I mean. So I'm just going to rewrite the problem so I can see it better. Because one really cool thing about multiplication is you can rearrange the order and you're still going to get the same answer. And I think that's so cool. So just so I remember, I'm going to do this part first. And then I'm going to add my 4/5. And remember, it doesn't matter where I put my 4/5. I could have put it over here, but I'm choosing to put it over here so I have room. So -1 times -7 is a +7. Remember, negative times negative is positive. And 7 times 1 is 7. And then I'm just going to bring back down my 4/5. Because remember, still can't forget about that. So 7/7, that's also the same as saying 1, like 1 whole. And then don't forget about that 4/5. So 1 times 4/5 is just 4/5. How easy was that? I just want to show you guys real quick what would have happened if I multiplied across, if I decided that I didn't want to deal with moving, if I didn't want to deal with moving things around and I just left it as it is. So -1/7 times 4/5 times -7/1. So my brackets are here and here, but in multiplication we said it didn't really matter. So we have -1/7 times -7 times 4 is -28. And then 5 times 1 is 5. And then we're just going to multiply across again, which is -1 times -28 is +28. And 7 times 5 is 35. And this can be reduced to 4/5 if I divide these both by 7. See? So this is the same thing. Or if you decided to say, well, I'm just going to erase the brackets and just multiply straight across, then down here your fraction would look like -1 times 4 times -7 all over 7 times 5 times 1 You can do this way too, but just don't forget that when you do this way, you have to remember that you have a negative sign here and a negative sign here. So these are going to be positive, and then this is going to be positive. So just a little side note, and then I think this way gets you the reduced way a lot faster than if you do this way, because even here, I thought, oh, well, I still have to reduce that part. Now you guys are going to be able to work on the examples. Remember that when we're dividing your steps, so we have an improper fraction. If they're not in improper fraction form, then we keep, change, flip, multiply across, and then we reduce. Okay, I believe in you. And remember, with this one, it looks scary, but it's not, because you may or may not be able to make a multiplicative inverse out of this one to try to get 1. So I went through and did all these problems. Make sure you guys are checking your work, and make sure you come to class with questions if you have any, especially with this one or this one. Bye.